Maybe the reason the perfect space sim still feels way out of reach is not because nobody has actually tried to build it. It could well be because the fantasy itself is split, and let me tell you what I mean by that. So for years, players have been chasing the same dream, a living galaxy where the ship feels real, the world feels immense, and what you do inside that world actually matters. And as players, we often want the cockpit, we want the scout, we want the fleets, the economy, the sense of consequence. And here's the thing, to some extent those games do exist, but the more time I've spent with them, specifically Elite Dangerous and X4 Foundations, the more I think those things are still living in very separate places. In other words, we've got at least two very distinct ideas of what the perfect space game is, and very difficult to have these merge into a single product or a single game. Now, Elite Dangerous gives you the life of a pilot. X4 gives you the life of, how shall we put it, an admiral, someone in charge, and how that plays out is very specific. One game brings the galaxy right up into your face, and the other lets your actions spread throughout that galaxy. And if you've ever found yourself loving one of these games while still somehow longing for the other, well, today I'm going to talk about why I think that is. And just so you know, this is not a video about which game is better. The video is going to be about a split at the heart of the dream that is the ideal space game. So let's start with Elite. Now, what Elite does better than almost anything else out there is presence. And this isn't all about visuals. It does have an amazing galaxy, but it's not really just about the scale either. Instead, it's the feeling of existing inside the ship that you take out there. Sitting in the cockpit, lifting off from the pad, the sound of the engines, each ship having its own distinct and unique sound. The traffic in the station as you exit and move through that docking hatch, and that now iconic sound as you're travelling through space in Super Cruise. All of this is the simple act of living in space, of being a pilot, of experiencing the galaxy through your ship. It's something that Elite Dangerous understands very well. And this is the idea of how the ship should feel, that it should be believable. And then that the galaxy around it should also be believable too. This is how everything connects together in Elite Dangerous, and to me that is the magic of the game. It makes Elite very much feel like a special place. It's very close, it's personal, and I guess we could also call it intimate if you want to talk about it in that sense too. And ultimately that means even when the galaxy itself is absolutely enormous, your experience of the galaxy is anchored in the seat. It's a canopy, it's the frame of your ship, the set of instruments, the UI around you, and that means ultimately it's a very human level perspective of the galaxy. And this holds true regardless of how simple the gameplay you're engaged in can be, such as just travelling in a straight line through space, or whether you're involved in the complexity of power play or the background simulation. In other words, it's simulating what it's like to be in space, at least this sci-fi version of space. It's taking something very complex and distilling it down to a very simple and clean experience. And actually that's where today's sponsor comes in, who actually go about things in a very similar way. There's a word from Extra Wallets. If you're planning on doing a spring reset, you know the type of thing, cleaner pockets, smoother carry, all without the bulk, one thing you might want to look at is Extra Wallets. The Extra Wallet Pro is an Italian leather wallet. It's slim, it's RFID protected, and it pops your cards out with a smooth metal trigger while still holding up to 14 cards and cash. It's backed by a lifetime warranty, and if leather isn't your thing, Extra also makes a metal wallet with the same quick access design. For travel, they've upgraded their vacuum packing bag with the new Travel Vacuum Bag Plus. It's faster to load with a side zip opening, it compresses more evenly with centralized valve, and uses tougher seam-sealed materials that hold air longer. The bag comes in two variants, frosted as well as grey. You can use it with Extra's separately available USB-C pump, or indeed any vacuum. Extra's spring sale runs from February 26th to April 13th with up to 45% off. And my code adds an extra 20%, so up to a 65% total. Check out the links in the video description. Now, if we compare Elite Dangerous to X4, well, X4 Foundations actually takes a very different approach. Ultimately, X4 is kind of chasing at the almost exact opposite direction when it comes to Elite Dangerous. So X4 can give you a cockpit, certainly. It can also give you ships and travel and the sensation of being in the world. But where it really comes alive is when you stop thinking like a pilot and start thinking like a force, like someone actually in control, not just of your ship, but of an empire. And that means when you're building the stations, shaping supply lines, when you're managing production, directing the fleets, and even watching the sectors change because of what you just set in motion. Well, in X4, the galaxy around you, well, it just doesn't surround you. It actually is something much more, because that galaxy begins to respond to you. And that puts X4 in a very different place to Elite. I mean, in Elite, you feel the world through presence. We've established that. But in X4, you feel it through consequence. You do something, and then that action starts to propagate, to spread around the galaxy. But what I'm saying here is that both, yes, Elite Dangerous and X4 are about scale. They're about huge, immense and complex systems. But one of them lets you act upon the galaxy at a systemic scale, from a lone person perspective, from a lone single player. So what I'm really saying here is that Elite Dangerous gives you the life of a pilot, while X4 gives you the life of an admiral. And it's only when I started comparing the games together from this kind of angle that I started understanding that there's a very real split in what people mean when they talk about the ideal space game. Some people like Elite because they want the perfect space game to feel like what the experience is from inside a ship, whilst others want a perfect space game to understand what it feels like when your decisions affect the galaxy. And I really can't help feeling at this point that what people mean when they're talking about the ideal space game is the idea of both. They want Elite's closeness, Elite's sense of scale, Elite's sense of being a pilot in a ship, but they also want the consequences of X4. Another way of putting this is that they want to fill the ship, but also fill the economy as well. They want to be the lone pilot that also has potentially a massive impact upon the galaxy. So if you leave the video at this point, then, well, that is the point really. Elite gives you presence and X4 gives you consequences. But there's something else to say here, because once you see that, there's something else that also becomes very clear as well. And ultimately, it really explains why Elite is often leaving people feeling so restless. And, well, I guess unsatisfied in some extent as well. Although that does depend on the player, of course. An issue here is that Elite is so extraordinarily good at the pilot fantasy that it naturally makes you want more from the galaxy around you. And I kind of feel that this is really because the ship feels so real, the travel feels real. Things like the stations, they feel real as well, as do obviously the planets and the galaxy. There's a sheer act of being out there that is kind of convincing enough that you start imagining a larger level of consequence that in many ways is just beyond your reach. It's just slightly out of the reach of your fingertips. And this can make, well, me at least, and maybe many of you out there, kind of want to be able to inhabit in a world that's also more responsive to you. What I'm trying to say then is that when players become frustrated with Elite, and yeah, there's a lot of problems going on there in terms of bugs and some design issues perhaps, and other things that Frontier haven't done over the years, but I'm talking about fundamentally about Elite Dangerous itself here as a game, and some of the frustration players feel about that, I don't really think is simply because what the game fails at necessarily. I think the problem is actually opposite here, because it's really what the game succeeds at, and it succeeds at all of this so well that the first part of this ideal space life, that it makes the absence of the second half feel really painful. It's basically because Elite Dangerous makes it so good to feel like being a real pilot up there in space, that you can really imagine being more than just a pilot, that there's so much more potential there in that universe. We can actually look at X4 in the same way, and in fact we'll find that it's the opposite direction. What happens here is that X4 gives you that second half that Elite Dangerous fails to. It gives you the consequence, it gives you scale, it gives you agency, and you can also have the pleasure of several systems interacting with each other and then pushing things into motion and creating entirely new aspects of the game, entire empires. But the cost of that is a kind of distance that between you and your ship, or you and the universe that you inhabit. It's kind of like the feeling of, a lack of feeling in some ways. There's a lack of tactile immediacy, I guess we could phrase it. It's kind of like the same sensory closeness that you get in Elite Dangerous. The idea, the feeling, I'm in this ship, I'm in this moment, that you get in Elite. And in many ways, Elite feels like it delivers that almost casually, so easily. It just does it so well. And that, in many ways, is kind of missing from X4. But here's the thing. In neither case is this actually a failure. What's happening is that one game is trading something to be very good at the other. And both games are doing this. X4 is giving you power over the galaxy, but that means that you have to experience that power at a different scale of feeling. Because it's very difficult to convince you you're a lone pilot inside a starship, but also that you have a full impact upon the entire galaxy around you. And Elite, of course, takes the opposite approach. And this, for me, is where a bigger genre problem actually reveals itself. This whole concept about the perfect space game. And yes, there's an elephant in the room here, of course, which is Star Citizen. But that's something we'll come to in a future video, because there's a very different take on that as well. So what we're getting at here is that a living galaxy can feel alive in two very different ways. It can feel alive because you're deeply present inside of that galaxy, because the ship, the sound, the travel, all of these immediate things that make you feel as though you're literally there in space. Or the galaxy can feel alive simply by virtue of your actions and how they propagate through that universe, how you can actually affect the economy, how you can impact fleets and infrastructure, and how everything there has a weight to it. Elite specializes in the first, and X4 specializes in the second. And I can't help but feel that the ultimate space game, the ultimate space sim, kind of feels elusive, that it's very hard to achieve, because bringing both of those elements together is unbelievably difficult, especially if you're going to do it in a multiplayer environment. The thing here is that it's hard enough to make the ship feel real, that the galaxy you're flying through is real, and it's hard enough to make an economy feel real, and that you can actually have an impact upon it. And doing both of them at the same time, in the same world, whilst keeping both sides really deep and meaningful and complex, is a dream that everyone keeps on thinking about, and, no developer as yet has fully achieved. So this to me is why both of these games are so special, because both of them have achieved something that the other hasn't. In fact, each of them has achieved something that very few other games out there have ever achieved. And I'm not saying here that one needs to replace the other. It's not a direct comparison in the sense of one game is better than the other. But it's simply pointing out that both of these achieve, half of being the perfect space game, whilst leaving the other half to the other game. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. It's quite a, in some ways it's a very straightforward idea. In other ways, it's a fairly complex idea, simply due to the nature of these games. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching this video all the way through, and my thanks again to Extra for sponsoring this video. Do check out that link in the video description.